Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast, hosted by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. After nearly 20 years exploring the world of conspiracy culture, we are taking our guests and listeners on a guided tour of the rabbit hole. Our mission? To discover where the truth lies.
Profits, popularity, prima donnas, praise, and profits. When I was informed that the two titans of tall tales, Alex Jones and David Icke, were to meet and debate, I was immediately reminded of the scintillating back and forth between Gore Vidal and William Buckley, inasmuch as I really wished I was watching that instead. Actually, it gave rather a few insights into the egos, the need for attention, the hypocrisies, the lies, and the lack of principles found in the conspiracy crowd. Recently, David has discovered a new, if petulant, way of getting attention. He slags off his rivals and former colleagues. He is particularly angered that people seem to have taken a shine to the pouting, spoiled, faux intellectual man-child, Elon Musk. Icke doesn't like him for reasons. Mostly to be contrary to the alt-right crowd, but partly due to his Neuralink brain implants. Despite their application being to help people who have lost the use of their legs, Icke is suspicious of anything new. This is mainly because if people don't understand something, they can be scared with it, and David can spin it into the narrative of his worldview, the main aspect of which is that David was right about anything and everything, and anyone who mocked him in the 1990s is woefully wrong. David says it's due to concerns about these chips being part of a mind control program, and even if they definitely aren't for that, they bloody well might be, which is near enough. To be fair, David is kind of right. Elon Musk is a billionaire elite that messes around with NASA or something maybe, and he likes computers, which are part of the control grid. He really should be an enemy of the truth movement if they stick to their admittedly loose principles. I would hate to speculate, but I'm going to anyway. I suspect the reason he has been embraced by the conspiracy crowd is due to Elon's edgelord midlife crisis, please come back to me Amber Heard, spiral of sadness that included racism, anti-Semitism, anti-trans, anti-woke, and anti-immigrant sentiment from the South African living in the USA. Tragically, this appealed to David and Alex's audience. Elon is, of course, the owner of the car company Tesla, and some have wondered if he had based himself somewhat on the famed business mogul Henry Ford. Sadly, not in his car design or his business acumen, but more in regard to his prejudices and extremely questionable politics. In more recent times, Musk has backed off the blatant anti-Semitism in a totally sincere change of heart that has absolutely nothing to do with his failing platform, rotting image, and increasingly less well-off and incandescent shareholders. Elon seems more concerned with cultivating a pathetic, frat boy, 4chan, own the libs persona rather than tend to his many failing businesses. He's like a middle-aged man who has abandoned his family, bought a Harley Davidson, and spends all his day revving the engine outside the local comprehensive school to try and impress the hard lads in year 4. If I am honest, though, I suspect Icke actually wants Musk's attention and patronage. Musk is credulous and rich, and Icke can talk an amazing amount of bullshit. Icke may claim to hate Musk, but I'm sure that he would find a way to tolerate his audience, grudgingly accept their praise, reluctantly acknowledge their lionization, and disdainfully take their money. Alex has fully embraced this potential revenue stream because, hey, he's got bills to pay. $1.5 billion worth of bills that he owes to the parents of the children who were murdered at Sandy Hook. So, principles, schminciples. David, feeling that he isn't quite the main attraction anymore, has been goading Alex Jones, and anyone popular, into interviewing him for weeks. Jones, realizing that this might draw him an audience to sell his snake oil medicine to, responded to this tantrum by graciously inviting Icke onto his show. Jones had possibly realized that a percentage of this audience believe in space lizards, and therefore might not be the most cynically minded. In turn, he might just be able to persuade some of them to purchase his shady pills. The dynamic is interesting. I suspect neither of these men like each other. They're both self-obsessed and attention-craving, and they are essentially rivals, but circumstance has thrown them together, and they are just going to have to get on with it. It is not dissimilar to the plot of the film Tango and Cash, or when two straight porn stars that have discovered the lucrative nature of the homosexual side of the industry finally meet on set. This squalid and undignified ecosystem of fevered egos is much like two praying mantises hooking up on Grindr. The fact that they are using each other goes unspoken. Each is there for their own selfish needs, but there is an underlying tension, with both parties acutely aware of the other's need for dominance, which may result in having your face suddenly eaten off mid-coitus. Figuratively speaking, of course, unless Alex is particularly drunk, in which case all bets are off. Neither of these men are in their prime, career or life-wise. Both are acutely aware that a new crop of far-right tossers have somewhat stolen their thunder. Alex has embraced this and tried to get along with this new crowd to varying degrees of success. David has basically said that everybody but him is a massive twat that has no clue about what is really going on. It's a bold stratagem. We can only wait to see how it plays out. Ironically, the news that these two were meeting was only temporarily the biggest thing on the internet. At the same time, it was announced that two even bigger shits would be circle-jerking each other off disguised as journalism in an even more distasteful and obvious attention and revenue farming exercise. Tucker Carlson, the man with the face of perpetual bewilderment, had secured an interview with dictator, war criminal, and hero to incels everywhere, Vladimir Putin. Decent journalists end up dead in Russia, usually via the window of a high-rise building, so I am sad to say that it is an absolute certainty that Tucker will emerge completely unscathed from this interview. Many journalists have approached Putin for interviews. John Sweeney, when he doorstepped Putin with a question, was punched in the stomach by one of his hired thugs. One wonders quite why the butcher of Grozny was so willing to have a tete-a-tete with the veteran of government propaganda, whore for Fox News, and latterly the preppy face of white supremacy, Tucker Carlson. Who can say? It seems obvious that Tucker will literally do anything to keep his tragic brand relevant. He's gone all Lord Whore, but that should probably be spelt with a W and pronounced Lord Whore. Jones realized this and desperately started trying to ride Tucker's coattails. Icke stuck to his guns and simply raged at everyone and everything on Twitter, telling them that COVID was fake and that he was some sort of serologist Nostradamus. He and his acolytes amused themselves by continuously posting videos from the 90s in which he makes a number of predictions, namely a world central bank, a world government, a world currency, and a world army. Oh, and a fully compliant population controlled by implanted microchips, none of which have come true. Jones was recently interviewed on Tucker's Twitter show, a show Carlson started after being fired from Fox News for costing them hundreds of millions of dollars with his lies about voting machines. Getting kicked out of Fox News for lying is a bit like getting kicked out of a ballet contest for doing a plie. Fox News is a cesspit, and the fact that Tucker is too toxic for even them speaks volumes. Since his departure from the Murdoch propaganda network, Carlson has set up his own disinformation program where he can gleefully rattle off fascist and racist talking points, safe in the knowledge that Sissy SpaceX, Space Karen, he of the numerous shit leather jackets, Elon Musk, gets all excited for edgelord white supremacist content like a 13-year-old who has discovered his older brother's Derek and Clive CDs. Previously, Tucker has interviewed known liar, fraudster, and sexual assault enthusiast Donald Trump, suspected and probable liar Larry Sinclair, who claims to have had crack-fueled sex with Barack Obama, and also known liar Alex Jones. Carlson was never really respected, but at least he used to have the appearance of legitimacy. Now, Carlson is one of the pantheon of paid liars that rile up the ignorant with lies designed to terrify and titillate at the same time, that seem to occupy Twitter in the same way that a tapeworm might occupy someone's bowels. He has less integrity than Burke and Hare. And that's where Twitter is at the moment. It's an arms race for who can garner the most hate-filled followers, a puerile, populist popularity contest with the occasional porn bots thrown in. So even before it began, this meeting of mangled minds was already upstaged. However, at separate times, both Icke and Jones have claimed to have an intimate relationship with none other than God, both claiming to be prophets sent on a mission of truth by the deity himself. So perhaps they can call in a favour and have him drop in for a cameo, provide an appraisal of their respective missions, or at the very least do some insignificant miracles. As it transpired, the Tucker-Putin interview turned out to be rather a damp squib. It was certainly watched a lot, but it failed to destroy the Matrix or own the libs. In fact, it was actually really, really fucking boring. I mean, say what you like about Hitler, but at least he could hold your attention. The interview was the predictable lies and propaganda from Putin, with Tucker oscillating from his usual look of befuddlement to one of palpable boredom, only occasionally punctuated with sycophantic laughs that reminded me of the character Ellis from Die Hard. But sadly, there was no Hans Gruber pistol combination to make this end. On the day of the interview, David spent his time promoting the event as huge and life-changing. Alex spent the day kissing Vladimir Putin's arse, repeating his propaganda points and trying to associate himself with Tucker Carlson. He advertised the interview by saying he would be talking to disgraced ex-lobbyist and Nixon fan Roger Stone, adding that afterwards he would have a friendly chat with David about Elon Musk. David is increasingly reminiscent of the titular character played by Bette Davis in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. As his relevance fades, his bitterness and resentment at being sidelined has grown and grown. One can imagine him dancing and twirling on the beaches of the Isle of Wight, lost in remembrance of past glories. The world-changing event was supposed to begin at 6 on the dot. 5 past comes and goes, and Alex is still blathering on with Roger Stone. At about 10 past the hour, Alex segues into the David Icke debate and immediately begins throwing subtle shade David's way. Firstly, Alex says, "I've been wanting to get him on for months, and we've got him." This basically says to the audience, David has been whining on the internet for no good reason, which is a rare moment of honesty from InfoWars. Jones continues, "Best-selling author, former top BBC broadcaster, former head of the Green Party." Now, to most people, these would simply be impressive and interesting sounding entries to a CV. But to those who have eyes to see, this is actually an insult. The BBC and the Green Agenda are two of the arch enemies of the truth movement. Connection to these organisations would be seen as a very negative thing and arouse suspicion. It's a bit like introducing a new primary school teacher by including the fact that he used to be a former roadie for Gary Glitter. Jones continues, "But he's better known for the last 35 years since he got thunderstruck with a vision of the coming New World Order. I really respect him. I know he's a great guy, David Icke." Jones then rambles about how David gives a different perspective to Elon Musk, who Jones says is definitely fighting against the New World Order, alongside them to help accelerate the Great Awakening of the masses, which is fanciful at best. Jones says that he is annoyed that Icke has labelled him a minion of Musk. Icke hasn't said this exactly, but he has accused Alex of pandering to Elon Musk, which is true. There is a whole swathe of sycophantic parasites who are kissing Musk's arse in an attempt to curry favour and grow their brand. For no good reason, Alex then brags that Joe Rogan says that Alex Jones is right about everything, and explains how he turned down a $10 million a year contract from Roger Ailes of Fox News to be the new Rush Limbaugh. Alex then says Twitter is a good tool, but he's not going to put on knee pads and give Elon Musk a blowjob. He says that, but Jones does owe an awful lot of money to the parents of Sandy Hook, so let's wait and see. Also, why did his mind go directly to the need for knee pads? That sounds like the voice of experience learned through hard lessons talking there. The screen reveals a silent and clearly furious Ike. He has the look of a man who has complained to the waiter that his spoon is dirty, only for the waiter to respond by rubbing his genitals through his mashed potatoes. So the scene is set, and it's already a battle of tetchy egos. David, resplendent with his flowing silver hockey hair and the countenance of a mistrustful bird of prey. Alex, looking increasingly like Krang from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And this is a shame because, and this is a hill that I am totally prepared to die on, Alex Jones, aged about 18, was an absolute Baldwin. But being beautiful does not make a good person, and Alex was by all accounts a total shit. He has often told the story of how he had to escape to Austin after having exposed the local police force as drug dealers, alongside the fact that sexy Illuminati women were literally throwing themselves at him 24/7, trying to persuade him to join their satanic cult. The truth is that Jones was a bully who kids got sick of. The final straw was when he sucker punched a boy in his year who he was jealous of. Jones fancied the lad's girlfriend, and rather than take the plenty more fish in the sea attitude, he punched the boy in the back of the head, knocking him out. Jones was later invited to a party where most of that school year fell on him and gave him a fucking good kicking, nearly beating him to death. But there is no true beauty without decay, and Jones's current appearance very much speaks to that. Alex says to Ike that he is a little hurt at his comments, but he respects David and thinks of him as a friend. David, seething and icy, does not appear to reciprocate such a sentiment. David starts his speech with a huge frustrated inhalation of breath, like a mechanic who is about to tell you that an entire new engine is needed, and says, "Right," in a tone of pure British annoyance. "I'm not saying don't use Twitter, I use it," says Ike, somewhat dodging Alex's concerns and implying that if he does something, then it's perfectly okay. There has become a mainstream alternative media which dominates the airwaves. I mean, he is right, but it does appear that his main gripe is not the content of their information, as much as the fact that they get a larger audience than him. David then tells a pointless, self-aggrandizing lie. "When I started, there was no alternative media. I watched it emerge." This is nonsense. There was Mae Brussell. There was Gary Allen, who influenced Alex. There was G. Edward Griffin, William Cooper, Rabbi Antleman, who David has cribbed content from, Jordan Maxwell, who both Alex and David have cribbed content from, Anthony Hilder, who both of them have cribbed content from, Myron Fagan, who both of them have cribbed content from, Madame Blavatsky, Manly P. Hall, Alice Bailey, who Ike has cribbed from, and Nesta Webster, who they have both cribbed from. Although, to be fair, few of them are on Twitter, hampered by the fact that they're dead. David launches into a tirade about how the alt media is obsessed with the battle between left-wing and right-wing politics, in a none-too-subtle dig at Alex, who has in recent years been heavily pro-Trump, critical of the left, and supportive of numerous right-wing figures. David himself has also taken this position, but recently he slagged off Trump a bit, so I assume he hopes people will forget his anti-trans, anti-immigration, and anti-woke sentiment, his Holocaust denial, and his pro-Brexit viewpoints. But Alex isn't playing this game, and so he butters Ike up. "It's a false dialectic that you pioneered exposing." Ike looks genuinely shocked at the compliment, and he stumbles his words before explaining that above the left and right is the cult. Now, this is not the band who did She Sells Sanctuary. Predictably, I'm afraid, it's Jews. Speaking of the band The Cult, this highlights another hypocritical aspect of the conspiracy crowd: selective significance, and a willingness to simply ignore facts if they don't fit. You see, the guitarist of the band The Cult is in a relationship with former glamour model and conspiracy enthusiast Leilani Downing. Now, she has, in her own way, done huge amounts over the years to combat the stereotype of the dumb blonde. Previously, she was one of the faces of David's iconic pay-per-view network. She appeared on their promotional material and was touted as one of their main presenters. She then jumped ship and went off to work for Mark Steyn, who'd been kicked off GB News for getting them into hot water with Ofcom. She's also busy mates with Lawrence Fox's girlfriend, who seems to be a rather unpleasant person and evidently isn't the best judge of character. Recently, Mark Steyn has been fined $1 million for defaming the climate scientist Michael Mann. Anyway, the point is that in the conspiracy world, there is a truism that all bands must have sold their soul, or at least compromised their integrity to the Illuminati to succeed. Satanic or Freemasonic imagery is apparently hidden in the artwork of such artists as a sign of their unholy allegiances. The band The Cult, who used to be called Death Cult, has artwork filled with imagery such as Egyptian winged circles, which are sometimes seen as representations of historical UFOs, black goats, snakes, wolves, crossed bones, a horned circle that looks a little bit like a devil, and they also have an album called Beyond Good and Evil, which is a reference to Nietzsche, not to mention the rather obvious fact that they're called The Cult. Normally, these would all be glaring red flags for the conspiracy crowd, and the fact that the band had been popular for decades would also be a solid gold piece of evidence that they must be part of the system and therefore have very probably sacrificed more animals than Colonel Sanders. But no, for whatever reason, everyone chose to ignore this. Also overlooked is Leilani Dowding's glamour model past. Don't get me wrong, I have absolutely no problem with this. There is nothing there to criticise. Sex work is work, and if she feels happy or empowered doing modelling, then more power to her. However, it does somewhat jibe with Icke's totally sincere and in no way reactionary concerns about the Illuminati using a plethora of devious tactics such as sex, promiscuity, and men dressed as flamboyant ladies reading stories to children to send them irreparably gay in order to destroy the family unit, for reasons that aren't entirely clear. The best example of this hypocrisy and willingness to abandon the main principles of the concept of the New World Order is the conspiracy crowd's embrace of Donald Trump as a rebel and anti-establishment figure. He's propped up by the Heritage Foundation. He literally had to audition in front of them to get the presidential nomination in the first place. But he did say that he hated Hillary Clinton, despite being a former friend and them being related to one another. And he did mention the deep state, despite being backed by the oil industry, think tanks, and the Kochs. And he says racist things to own the lips. So they decided that the known liar and billionaire was in fact one of their own. Trump is such an arsehole that my only hope is that this abhorrent behaviour will one day be explained as a necessary cover for his true identity. Batman. Think about it. Trump has the resources to secretly fight crime, and on the surface, he's such a selfish and useless waste of skin that he's absolutely the last person that you would expect to be Batman. We can but hope. David himself is also guilty of selective outrage. For years, he has stated two things. One, that anyone who works for the BBC is part of the establishment and are in on the plot, and probably some type of satanic bastard too. And two, that it was always an open secret at the BBC that DJ and presenter Jimmy Savile was abusing kids by the dozen. Firstly, Icke himself worked for the BBC for many years, and Savile was working there at the time. Icke likes to pretend that he outed Savile or was one of the first to raise the alarm, but he didn't. Not once. Never. Until Savile was dead and the mainstream media started to talk about it and bring victims forth. Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols had voiced concerns years ago. Jerry Sadowitz, Stuart Lee and Richard Herring had all joked about his proclivities, but nothing from Icke. So either, by his own logic, he was part of the cover-up, or the knowledge was not quite as widespread as he would have us believe. David says, when you go deeper into the rabbit hole, into the web, which makes me wonder what sort of a hellish surrealist nightmare the Isle of Wight countryside must be, with these terrifying and ungodly spider rabbits roaming about the place. David finishes his rant about how everyone but him is stupid for promoting strictly right-wing talking points, before offering up two talking points that couldn't be more far right if you dressed them up in KKK robes and gave them a job on GB News. Firstly, he says that Putin was forced to invade Ukraine due to NATO expansion, which is an untrue right-wing trope. And then by saying they, which probably means Jews, are dismantling Western culture with illegal immigration, which is also an untrue trope of the far right. Alex tries to play nice and offers up, hey, Elon hates the open border, to which David snaps, yeah, words are easy. David then states that it is useful to the cult, again, not the band, for people to see Putin as a hero. He then hedges his bets and says that he actually quite likes a lot of what Putin says. This may or may not be true, but he is simply trying not to alienate the audience, who he realizes do like Putin. David is cross with Putin because of his praise of China. China, as David points out, is apparently the blueprint for the New World Order, and their society is heavily censored, government-controlled, digital prison. David and Alex both seem ignorant of similar, if not worse, infringements of human rights and the media that happen daily in Russia. So just to clarify, David's gripe with Putin is not the war crimes, not the annexing of other countries, not the kidnapping of children en masse, not the corruption or censorship and murder of political rivals and journalists. No, it's none of that. It's the fact that they want favourable trade relations with China. Putin praised Elon, tries Alex. David simply looks nonplussed. Alex is clearly getting annoyed, so he has a dig at David, pointing out that he has made plenty of derogatory comments about Jones recently, which are frankly uncalled for. David refuses to offer even the slightest hint of contrition and says, "It's not about you, mate, or me, it's about what's happening in the world." But it is very obviously about him and how he feels slighted at not getting the recognition that he feels he deserves, and about him being usurped by new faces. Alex looks wide-eyed and simultaneously incredulous and incensed, as if somebody had just spilled his drink over his wife, who they also called fat. He throws his pen and makes the universally recognized hand gesture for "what the fuck?" David delivers his main concern: artificial intelligence and the cloud. He worries that humans will connect to AI via the cloud, and it will do our thinking for us, and that Elon's support of this via satellite networks, etc., built by his companies, not to mention that Neuralink chips go in the brain, is proof that he is in on the evil plot. For no reason at all, Icke then announces that anyone who had the COVID vaccine already has the nanotech inside them, and this will automatically connect to the cloud, although he stubbornly refuses to explain how I could use this to download films and music. Alex lightly scolds David for just ranting and not trying to have a conversation, but this is because David doesn't really do conversations. He will scan what you've just said for a word that he recognizes, and he'll use that as a jumping-off point for a pre-prepared diatribe about a subject that he wants to talk about, be it relevant or not. He's very much like an improvisational comedian, similar to Sandy Toksvig, only he's shit and painfully not funny, similar to Sandy Toksvig. "Look," says Alex, "you're great at lecturing, and you've had about 80% of the time. Now, we are friends." David, who looks like he's just caught Alex wiping dog shit on his new hall carpet, takes a long inhale of breath and grabs his knee to prevent him from making a fist. "I'm not trying to be mean," says Alex. "I don't care," says a perceivably fuming Icke. "Look, we're friends. I like you. Do you like me?" asks Jones. "Just go ahead," replies David through gritted teeth. "Do you think I'm an agent of the New World Order?" questions Alex. "You don't have to be a knowing agent of the cult," begins David, before a visibly hurt Alex interrupts. "I'm a useful idiot." "Well," states David, "if you have a certain mentality and focus on the left-right politics to get promotion, you don't need to be a part of it." Alex throws his pen again in frustration, and it goes bouncing off his desk. "If I'm honest, I don't think either of them are useful." "I invented the phrase left-right paradigm," lies Alex. The phrase was actually in use in the 19th century. "If you connect to AI, it becomes your mind," states Icke, missing the point that most people's opinions already come from strangers on the internet via their phone, filtered through whatever worldview they happen to hold. "And the WEF wants autonomous vehicles where the computer decides where you want to go," warns David. This isn't entirely accurate. The cars don't dictate the destination, they just drive. I mean, really, what does he think's going to happen? It isn't Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey. "Take me to the shops, please, car." "I'm sorry, David. I can't do that, I'm afraid." "Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer to..."
Hello, initiates of the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast. Dom Jolly here. How are you? Sorry to butt in, But I just wanted to let you know that I've written, well, a book that I'm very, very proud of called The Conspiracy Tourist, in which I travel around the world taking a look at the weird world of conspiracies, and I think you might like it. Not only that, but I'm touring the book and doing live shows all around England from the 28th of Feb to the end of March, and it would be smashing to see you there. I think you'd like it. If you are interested, go to my website, www.domjolly.tv. And now, on with the podcast. Thanks.
Hey, initiates, it's me, Brent Lee. Just a quick intermission here before we get back into the episode to tell you about our new and improved Patreon. We've added a brand new initiate tier for those of you who want to listen to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy without the ads. This entry-level tier is only £2 a month. Or join our second-level tier and become a shill for just £4.50 a month. Not only will you get ad-free episodes of the podcast, you'll also have early access to every new episode up to a week before they're released to the public, and a premium episode made only for Patreons every month. Also included is a welcome pack of our previous content. Neil is giving you 4 of his books, including Now's the Only Thing That's Real, a re-examination of the Manson murders, motives, and mythos. I have got 8 albums to give you from my time back as a producer and rapper. And the great Nicholas C. Gray is giving you a copy of Headache Comics 4. Plus, an invitation to join our private Discord where you can chat to the Some Dare Call It community. And finally, the Handler tier. For £9 a month, you'll get everything I've already mentioned, but you'll also get an invitation to join us live every time we record an episode. You can hop in the chat and ask us or our guests anything during the session, and you'll get to see everything that goes on behind the scenes, including all of Neil's hot takes that I have to cut out of the final mix. So, please, if you can, do consider joining us on patreon.com/somedarecallitconspiracy. Now, let's get back to the show.
Alex perceptibly gives in and sighs with exasperation. Okay, let's just say you're right. What is the plan for Elon? David ignores him and goes into a pre-prepared rant about how far-right Dutch politician Eva Vladingerbroek used to be suspicious of Elon Musk, but now is a big fan of his. Alex interjects, "Look, I'm not mainstream alternative media. Let's get that straight." And then he suggests, well, look, if they've set up Musk as a fake saviour, then we must be winning. This is nonsensical. The point is to say to David, yeah, I already thought of that, and I've taken it a step further. It's cock-waving, in its most basic form. David looks irate. Alex starts to talk about how he gets screamed at in the street, much less now than at certain times in his life, and he's interpreted this as a sign that people are waking up. David says, when I first started, you couldn't fill a phone booth. Now, he's talking about his audience, saying that he's been in the game for a long time. However, Alex clearly thinks David is saying that he's far more popular than him, and his hackles rise. And he says in a slow, measured tone that indicates he is fastly approaching the end of his tether, I said, you were saying there is an awakening, so Musk is brought in to co-opt us, which is exactly what David has been saying. Oh, then I misunderstood you, says Icke. Alex throws his pen again, leans back in his chair, and looks infuriated. David then repeats the same talking point as if he wasn't listening to Alex, which he wasn't. Alex implores, that's what I just said, David. David fixes a withering stare and says, stop making this personal, Alex. Jones looks like he wants to climb into the video screen and throttle Icke to death. Icke explains that previously Twitter was run by the deep state. He says that the so-called Twitter files prove this, which they absolutely do not. He then questions why the deep state would sell Twitter to Elon, which they absolutely did not. He then raves about, since COVID, people are coming in and being promoted as the people we need to listen to, and they get massive audiences and are given interviews with Tucker Carlson. What about the people who were calling it out in 2020? He whines, clearly referring to himself. I bet that Tucker would interview you, says Alex, and Icke's eyes perceptibly light up. There's even a hint of a smile. But David is on a roll. Where's the people that called it out at the time? Where is their promotion? The ones that could see it at the time because of the research that they've been doing before. This all smacks of jealousy and narcissism, and as if to prove my suspicions true, Icke, realising that he might actually get to go on Tucker Carlson's show, explains that actually he thinks that Tucker's a great guy. David has touched on something important here, but only by accident. This is a major flaw within conspiracy circles, and it involves them doing research. David is presenting it as a favourable attribute of the savvy observer. However, it just isn't. When you're doing an investigation, it is vital not to colour the narrative. This means bringing your preconceived ideas to the forefront before you've even seen the evidence, and therefore prejudicing the outcome with your expectations. If you arrive at a crime scene already convinced of who is guilty, then you will view the evidence through that lens, and you will more than likely miss actual evidence as you seek to prove your premise. The conspiracy crowd does this all the time. We know that 9/11 was an inside job, hence any and all so-called terror attacks must also be an inside job. 2 points. You don't actually know that it was an inside job, you suspect it was. And even if it was, so what? It doesn't mean that any future events will directly match past events. The conspiracy crowd is full of these truisms concerning international bankers, terror attacks, and political assassinations. The problem is that just because they are accepted as truisms does not mean that they are true, nor are your interpretations of other world events based on these truisms. So although Icke means that doing research will give you perspective on the reality of the world, it is far more likely to just instill biases and a worldview based on ideas that are not even close to being correct. Alex tries to give David the floor before the break to talk without interruption, but David isn't listening and continues his diatribe about AI. Alex looks like he wants to kill David and does the finger pyramid of contemplation in an attempt to calm himself and prevent him from putting his fist through the desk. David says that AI will create unthinking hive minds that just go along with what they've been told, overlooking the glaring irony that this perfectly describes his cult leader-like relationship he has with his followers and fans, apart from the ones who died from COVID because he told them that it didn't exist. Alex tries again to give David the floor for the remaining few minutes, but David is still ignoring him. So Alex tries to find common ground. So Elon is the good cop, and Gates and Schwab are the bad cops. Icke ignores him again, so Alex holds up pages of what look like tweets. I'm not going to be an asshole and read all these things that you said about me. David interjects that Elon Musk is a frontman for the cult and a great salesman, but I have to say that I don't think his shareholders would agree with this sentiment. Alex gives David the floor for the final 10 minutes, and he starts on a speech about how Elon is a generally bad bastard and a frontman for the cult that secretly rules the world. After 2 minutes, David runs out of steam, and there is an embarrassing silence for about 30 seconds. "Where's Alex?" asks David. "Is he away from his desk?" Alex is away from his desk for some reason, and a clearly annoyed Icke is told to keep going by the producer. He repeats the thing about left and right both being controlled by a cult a few times, and then thankfully Alex returns. Alex reappears on the screen. It's entirely unclear if he's nipped for a drink or a line, or he just had to go and punch some walls, but he offers up, "Hey, I've been invited to the Global Government Summit." "They're trying to co-opt you," says an unimpressed and dismissive Icke. David then claims, "The old media questions everything, and they don't eulogize anybody, and it doesn't think of anyone as a god. They definitely do not do the former because of the fact that they absolutely do the latter. People look to icons of the scene such as David and Alex for guidance. Some even live their lives in accordance to their teachings, and that's why it's so important for them to be humble and accurate in what they say. But they both self-aggrandize and express bitterness and not getting a fair amount of praise, like a mix of Caligula, Morrissey, and Mariah Carey. As for accuracy, they have a tendency to be like pissed stormtroopers from Star Wars, not the Nazi kind. Well, actually. Anyway, there is a special class of superfan of Alex and David that truly buy their bullshit unquestioningly. This is an elite group, their absolute biggest fans, who never point out prior inaccuracies, ignore contradictions in the message, disregard predictions that have not come to pass, and shower praise and affection on the pair regardless. These are the absolutely sold, those completely hypnotized with the image and in no doubt of the pair's position in history. These are the ones who buy into the ideology and information presented to a sometimes dangerous degree. A small mercy is that it is they themselves that happen to be their biggest fans. Alex and David, like jazz musicians and James Corden, are far greater fans of themselves than even their most committed audience. After the break, Alex tells David off again for lecturing, but David is having none of it and starts to talk about how the world is really a simulation, a hologram. Reality as we know it isn't real. Now, this isn't actually a new concept, and despite what David might have you believe, he most certainly did not come up with the idea. A lot of stuff that I got ridiculed for, now science is catching up, says David. Academia has been talking about this for decades, with eminent people such as Nick Bostrom, Frank Wilczek, and Melvin Vopsam discussing the theory in serious terms. The concept has even been explored thoroughly in science fiction. Even Red Dwarf, the UK sitcom, had a plot about Better Than Life, the video game that people thought was real life. The concept goes back to Plato's cave. The story is that people lived in this deep cave and came to believe that the shadows cast on the back wall were reality. When they were taken out of the cave and shown the enormity of the real world, they found it far too much to cope with. Descartes also explored such themes. How can we know that we're real? We can't. However, we think, therefore we are. Basically, it appears that it's real, and we can't really do anything about it anyway, so just get on with it. Icke didn't get his knowledge of the subject from such lofty sources. No, he nicked it from the plot of The Matrix. But he also thinks that Monsters, Inc. is an accurate representation of how reptiles from other dimensions feed off our fear. He then talks about how the human eye can only see a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. His theory is that the light that we can't see must be absolutely teeming with reptilian aliens. We think the world is solid, but it isn't, he says. Now, I don't want to be ignorant or dismissive, but who the hell cares, right? Let's say that it is a simulation. So what? You can't game or manipulate the simulation. You can't alter it. You can't fly. You can't bend the rules of nature. If you jump off a tall building, you will still burst when you hit the floor, and you still have bills to pay. Realistically, how does this knowledge affect me or alter my life in any way? Also, I hate to split hairs, but I thought we were already in a simulation. Why do we need to hook up to AI in this reality in order to be fully controlled? Couldn't the people who are running the simulation, the lizards, I presume, just code our obedience into this simulation? Why not program it at that level, rather than convince us to move to AI in a world that isn't even real? Isn't that an unnecessary complication? Couldn't the simulation make us think however it wanted us to, without the need for AI, which doesn't actually exist, because nothing really exists, because this is a simulation? Alex starts to say that he loves David, realizes he's about to say this, and that his audience is wildly homophobic, so backtracks. David, I really like you. He does this at least twice. But he's obviously getting bored with David, who, to be honest, has been pretty rude. Look, we've heard all of this from you 100 times. Which book of yours should people buy? Here, Alex has accidentally hit the nail on the head. David churns out the same arguments, rewrites the same book periodically, and has the same talking points that he's had for years. He refuses to move on, which is possibly why he isn't quite the draw that he used to be. This is sad in a way because David has actually built a reputation that simply can't be taken away from him. If we use a music analogy, he's Led Zeppelin. Sure, he isn't charting at the moment, and the kids would rather go and watch Billie Eilish or some such shit. But he's still Led Zeppelin, and he will always be Led Zeppelin. It is a shame that he can't just accept and enjoy that. David then reveals that he's still writing a new book, which is why he turned down an offer to come onto InfoWars in January. And this obviously raises the question, if you were invited on the show and turned it down, why have you spent recent weeks insulting Alex and claiming to be ignored by him? Then Alex decides to listen to callers who are part of the space watching live on Twitter, and something very interesting happens. Someone comes on the line who sounds rather a lot like Elon Musk. Alex thinks it is Elon Musk. InfoWars thinks it is Elon Musk. And they tell David that it is Elon Musk. The only problem is that the caller isn't Elon Musk. But how the pair act, thinking they do have the attention of the billionaire, is very telling. I have to admit that when I was first listening, I too thought it was Elon. He has a similar sounding voice and accent. He uses phrases that Elon uses and talks about the things that Elon talks about. If you go on this guy's Twitter page, the name says Adrian, but it is full of praise for Elon, praise for his various businesses, and promotion of anything and everything Musk related. Knowing what a sad, fragile character Elon Musk is, I initially thought that this fanboy Twitter page was proof that the guy must be Elon. He is exactly the sort that, if he did set up a fake account, would not be able to help himself and would pour praise on everything he did. But Adrian has actually been in Twitter spaces with the real Elon before, where the similarity in voice has been spoken about. Adrian denies being Elon at least twice, but Jones and David are convinced that he is the Tesla mogul. I reiterate, it isn't, but Jones believes it is and starts sucking up to him immediately. Adrian, who isn't Elon Musk, starts by explaining to David that the hive mind he fears is already here because we all have smartphones connected to the internet. We're already connected to the AI, so to speak. And he is right, of course, because people do get their opinions from sources on the internet, often not based on what is true, but on what they would like to be true. Alex is beaming and asks hopefully, is this Elon Musk? It sounds like Elon. Adrian denies this emphatically. No, I'm just weird, he says. Adrian then drops a bombshell. He says that people have only really been talking about simulation theory since the Matrix film came out, and furthermore, that most people who subscribe to this theory due to the film haven't really understood what the film is about. Both of these things are absolutely correct. He explains that the twist in the film The Matrix is that there is no reality. Even when they supposedly break out of the Matrix so that they can live in unattractive grey flannel clothes in caves underground, they're still in the Matrix, just another level of it. That's why Neo is able to use telekinesis against the machines in Zion, which is supposedly the real world. Adrian then totally undercuts David's point. Let's say it is a simulation. So what? Are you going to break the simulation? Wouldn't that be suicide? He points out that wouldn't it be better to just make cool shit and make this simulation better if it is a simulation, and that breaking the simulation would surely result in the mass murders of others. Alex looks absolutely thrilled. David looks slightly nervous. Look, says David, is it better to know about reality or to stay in ignorance? What people do with that knowledge is up to them. This doesn't really answer anything or help in any way. And what the hell are we supposed to do with that information? And frankly, why should we give a shit? Adrian says that all augmenting humans to AI will do is speed up the process that we have now, and points out to David that perhaps technology could help us see the electromagnetic spectrum that is not currently available to human eyes. This would actually be problematic for Icke, because if that space isn't chock full of lizards, then it would seriously undermine everything that he's been saying for decades. A problem with this that is not brought up is what is considered transhumanism or augmentation in the first place. Are glasses augmentation? Are hearing aids augmentation? Is a prosthetic limb transhumanism? At what point does it stop becoming useful and start becoming scary? Alex suggests that opposition to Adrian's view is that of a troglodyte. He doesn't believe this. He's also ranted against transhumanism for years, but he thinks that this man is Elon Musk, so he's perfectly happy to call David a troglodyte in order to suck up to the billionaire, who he wants to be friends with. Is this Elon Musk? Asks David. No, 100% not, says Adrian. Because I've been told in the break by your staff that this is Elon, says a confused David. He needs plausible deniability, says Alex, not realizing that this really isn't Elon Musk. So let's just pretend that it's Elon, he says, with a grin like the Cheshire Cat. Adrian says that all AI will do is make the services we have now easier and quicker, and it might actually help us evolve. Sure, there will be risks and safety concerns, but we could talk about them sensibly. But this is not doom-laden enough for David, who says AI is designed to take over and replace the human mind. Again, I thought we were in a simulation. Why would this step be necessary? Anyway, Alex, who we must remember thinks he's talking to Elon Musk, says that he now thinks that augmentation is a good thing. David looks panicky and delivers a rather disjointed response. It's about where it's meant to go. Kurzweil said this. It goes to the point where your perceptions are delivered to you, and they aren't your perceptions. They're your sense of reality. And this is a very dark and dangerous road. It's not one that I want to live in. But Adrian is not swayed by this. So it's not the tech, but who sets reality, he asks. A gruff David responds, our senses are controlled. Adrian stumps Icke by asking the simple question, how is this actually a bad thing? And Icke looks stunned. Adrian continues, how is it a problem if perception is delivered to us? How is this actually a bad thing? Surely it's only a bad thing if our perception is false and it benefits someone else. How we would know any of this is another story. David looks like he has never thought of this and struggles to mash together a barely coherent response. Now, you must remember this is the crux of David's recent theories and has lately underpinned much of his work, but it appears that he's never considered these questions. Exactly that! Augmented reality. You can stick that in a dark place from my point of view, but I'm 72, well, coming up. That's my perception. But if I am being delivered a perception that gets me to stand up and walk out of this room, when I wouldn't do that if I was sitting here, that is not augmented reality. That is a takeover of reality. And if you were a force who wants to control the people, then, raising his voice, what are we talking about, Alex? In terms of the global cult and the non-human entities working through it, and the World Economic Forum and all these people, they're seeking to dictate our sense of reality. So, that's the lizard's ultimate plan. To get us to stand up and walk out of the room when we were previously sitting down. Those insidious, shape-shifting bastards. So, when you go into a room and totally forget why you went in there, is that the lizards doing that? So, it's aliens controlling reality, says Alex. I haven't seen any evidence of this, chips in Adrian. This is Elon Musk, states a positively giddy Alex. Bringing facts to a debate with David Icke is like bringing a tank to a knife fight. Icke looks like a man who has just cut into his beef Wellington and discovered that it is filled with hospital waste. Look, is this really Elon Musk? Because this is just playground stuff. He then goes on to explain that aliens are interdimensional, and then I presume, as a dig to Elon, says, going to Mars is easy. He then has a dig at Alex, simply not being able to help himself. Look, Alex, you spent years, I've spent years, decades really, researching this. The plan is a dystopia based on AI. They admit it. They, whoever he means, most certainly do not admit to this plan. Alex then cuts David's microphone, but he doesn't tell him, and Icke can be seen furiously mouthing something in the bottom corner of the screen. But Jones couldn't care less. He wants to talk to his new buddy Elon Musk about AI. Do you know what paperclip theory is? Asked Adrian. Yes, I do, but explain it to the audience, lies Alex. Paperclip theory, roughly, is we design an AI machine to make paperclips, and when he runs out of raw material, it destroys the world, turning anything and everything into paperclips, as it was programmed to. The point is to put safety checks in place to ensure technology doesn't run wild. Basically, Adrian is saying, I'll probably be fine. And that's perfectly good enough for Alex. Alex cuts back to a bewildered and frankly broken-looking David and offers to give him the last few minutes they have on air. Icke has the dejected and confused look of a man who genuinely thought he was invisible, being handcuffed and led away for lewd behaviour in the shallow end of a municipal swimming pool. I actually felt a bit sorry for him. He's been upstaged in the interview that was already upstaged by Tucker Carlson, which he only got by complaining on Twitter that he was being upstaged by everybody on a regular basis. I'm exposing an agenda to replace the human mind with AI. It's the cult's agenda. I've written about it for years. It's a takeover of human perception, previously done through information and in the future through more sinister interfaces. Alex cuts David off mid-sentence and goes back to Elon. Okay, bye mate. Thanks, says the disembodied voice of Icke, sounding genuinely hurt. Adrian is dealing with something at home, food boiling over or something, and this allows a previously unheard participant to start ranting about how we all need God and that Elon is going to put a mind control chip in everyone's brain. Alex cuts him off. Usually, this would be exactly the sort of thing that Jones is worried about, but principles are nothing when you have the opportunity to hang out with an extremely rich guy. When confronted with what he thinks is Elon Musk, Jones has become a total sycophant, fanboy toady, who is willing to go along with any suggestions, dismiss his friend David, and abandon the principles that he stated on air for years about the supposed dangers of transhumanism, mind control, and the power of the elites to control our lives. David, when confronted with what he thinks is Elon Musk, finds himself acting timidly and unable to provide an adequate explanation of his theory or a convincing argument against Musk's position. Adrian then starts talking about how in the future humans will be digital and we will have our personalities uploaded to technology, existing for years as a different form. Alex laps this up, and for a brief second the thought flashes across my mind, shit, what if David Icke was actually right? Alex then goes to thank Adrian, who he still thinks is Elon Musk, but Adrian has already hung up and is going about his day. There is an awkward silence for about 15 seconds as Jones hopefully waits for Elon to respond. Met with silence, Alex plugs Twitter in a further attempt to win favour with the billionaire that he definitely wasn't talking to.